session. So I do hope you'll forgive us for having to rethink the programme slightly. So we've got Jenny joining us at hopefully 1:15 to give her initial thoughts and feedback. And then what we're doing for the rest of the session. And I really think this is important that we do something like this, because it's really about bringing to life some of the great examples that organisations have got in relation to some of the key themes in the white paper. So instead of listening, you know, to people like me, I guess, talk about what we think, we're actually going to hand over to organisations, to staff, to tenants, to talk to us about what work they've been doing to meet some of the requirements that we have seen in the white paper. So I'm delighted, and a big thank you to all those organisations who have volunteered to do that today. It's fantastic that that you've joined us and are able to share your experiences and your initiatives with us. So thank you for that. So we've got a break around about 12:20, so stretch your legs, grab a cup of tea, and we'll be back running through to round about 3:10-ish. So I hope that's okay with everyone and everybody's happy with that. I don't know if anybody has got any questions or queries or thoughts about today's session, but I will try and bring you in if you indicate using the hands up or the chat function. I will try and bring in your comments and invite you to speak if possible, because we are on a bit of a tight schedule, but I will try my very best because we do want to hear from yourselves as well. So I hope that's okay. I don't know if I said who I was. Probably didn't actually. I'm getting that that sort of carried away with the housekeeping stuff. So if you don't know me, my name's Louise Thompson, Head of Business Services at Tpas England, and we've got Lisa with us, who is the I suppose the organizer, the admin person, the making it all happen person. So thanks to Lisa today as well. I'm hoping that now maybe Jenny has joined us. Lisa will tell me. Yeah, we've got a thumbs up. So I think without further ado then, I'll hand over to Jenny, who is Tpas CEO, to give you some feedback and insight into her thoughts around the white paper. So over to Jenny.
Well, hiya everybody, good morning. Lovely to see so many of you on this session this morning. Gosh, it's been a busy week, hasn't it, already so far, but finally it's here. So all the hints, all the talking about when will it come, that's over, and at least it's here, and we've got something concrete to talk about, and some kind of roadmap now for what needs to happen over the next coming months and indeed years. So delighted to speak. I'm not going to do loads of detail here today. You wouldn't expect me to, would you? Yet there's a lot to digest here on the white paper. But what I thought it would just be useful to do, and just sort of come and hijack the start of this session, is just to run through what's in the white paper, the key areas, the key chapters. I'm sure most of you will have had a chance to look at some of it so far, but not all of it. And indeed, I need to read 2, 3 or 4 yet still to go. But I think overall, just to give it an overall sense before we move to the slides, is we've got, like I say, a clear direction of travel now with this new white paper, this new charter, as it is now called. We're not relying on Fiona McGregor giving us hints. We're not relying on the Ombudsman and some of the stuff that they're doing to give us hints. We now know what we're dealing with. And for me and for Tpas, I think what it does, loads of details still to come, but I think generally what it does is tie together things that we've been saying for quite a while. It's the final piece in the jigsaw of building safety work that needed from Grenfell, around complaints, which we know is a big area, and around regulation in particular. So those 3 things I think we've all been talking about, haven't we, over all of these sessions. It kind of ties them all together nicely. Now there's loads of other detail in it, loads. So we need to kind of unpick some of that. But I'm going to try and just focus us. I'm going to whiz us through them all. But obviously I'll spend a little bit more time talking on some sessions, some chapters than others, as you'd expect. So I'm going to just share now over to my slides, and we'll start to work through some of those. Just bear with me while I do that. I've just hot-footed it from another session. It's all go this morning, so apologies for a little bit out of breath. Okay, so let's have a think then. We want to focus, don't we, obviously, as Tpas members, on the white paper and what it means for the future of engagement in particular, don't we? So if we move on, let's have a look firstly at the front page of it. Let's see what it's telling us. So great picture, lots of pictures in there, and I'm really grateful. I'm going to say thank you to so many of you that we got in touch with around case studies. Great to see Tpas gets a mention in there as well. But you know, you're appearing in there as well, and that's really important that we've got, you know, the stories of what people have been doing appearing in those, and I look forward to hearing more of those today as well. So what are we talking about here? Well, there's the kind of the foreword really about raising the standards. You know, most of us skip over the forewords, don't they, in these things. But it's useful to talk about, you know, standard of social housing, the aspirations. These are big aims, aren't they, about what this charter is trying to do. But let's see if we can try and meet some of that. So are those slides all right? Can everyone see those okay? Lisa, give me a thumbs up if they're all okay. Yeah, I've got a slightly skewed screen going on for me.
Yeah, you just go on to the main presentation.
Yeah.
Go at the bottom, click the full slideshow.
Yeah, it's we'll try again. Try and make that happen again.
There you go, that's better.
Yeah, it's it keeps flipping out of that, but I'll try and keep an eye on making sure it doesn't do that again. It keeps doing it. Okay, all right, so the 7 key areas, and again, nobody studied these in full detail yet, I'm sure, but there they are. These are the things that we're going to be talking about regularly over the coming months, aren't we? So this, you know, I think people are starting to read things into the practice called charter. Let's not get hung up on that. This is basically our new roadmap. So the 7 areas are not the same directly as what was in the green paper. So if you recall, we had 5 areas in the green paper, but a lot of what was there is in these areas as well. So you will see some read across. What we've tried to do in our members briefing that we put out yesterday or the day before was to try and make sure we sort of picked up where there was still gaps or where it had not read across directly. So do have a look at that members briefing, and I am going to refer to that members briefing all the way through here as well. So if you've read it, you'll hear me saying a lot of the same things, but you would expect that, wouldn't you? So let's go through some of these in a bit more detail. Again, it's early days, isn't it? So I know for many people, it's the first time we're all having a chance to have a look at it. So chapter 1 is talking about to be safe in your home. And these words I'm using here are directly from the white paper, not my words. So it says, we will work with industry and landlords to ensure every home is safe and secure. No one's going to argue with this, are they? No one's going to argue in this chapter. I mean, basically what we've got here is quite a lot of tying up in this chapter about some things that we've heard about before. It's a tidying up and it's coordinating some of the work that's already in stream from the building safety and the fire safety bill, again, which we talked about over the Tpas sessions, I know. So it's kind of tying that all together. It talks about the regulator of social housing's consumer regulation objectives are going to explicitly include safety. So there will be read across from the building safety regulator, but also with the regulator of social housing. That's important. Social landlords will have to nominate a person that is going to be responsible for complying with health and safety. There's a couple of nominating people going on in this white paper. We'll come back to another one in a bit. It talks about it, and again, these are things that we knew were already in traction, formalising the channels for information sharing between the regulator and the new building safety regulator once that comes on board. Quite a bit of talk gone on, has been picked up that there's going to be a consultation on mandating smoke and carbon monoxide alarms in social housing, and a future consultation on electrical safety in social housing. Again, nothing to fall out with there. I think there's been a bit of sort of pushback saying, well, kind of, are we all doing this anyway? And then you talk to the people, go, actually, I think you're fine in some areas, particularly some of the big local authorities down in London, maybe this isn't happening in the way that it should be. So, yeah, this is all good stuff. And it's about supporting the statutory and the good practice guidance on making sure all tenures are involved around building safety. You know, it's a chapter that nobody's going to fall out with. I think one thing that we mentioned in our members briefing is its tone is very much that it's all about poorly managed buildings, and the landlords are just not listening to tenants at all, and this is where all the problems come from. And if only they'd listen to tenants, everyone would be safe. And we know that's not true, don't we? Certainly if you listen to anything from the Grenfell inquiry over the last few weeks and longer than that, we know it's a bigger issue, so building safety, that is about compliance, it's about the products that have been used, it's about building control failures. and it's about government and the part that that's played in that. So we do make that point. We are disappointed that seems to be the feeling it's just a landlord issue. It's not. There's many players in this that have to make homes safe for people. So, but generally, nothing that's going to, I think, nobody's got anything to fall out with in that sector, in that chapter whatsoever. Obviously, we get to some more now that are swiftly more specific for Tpas members, and we're going to have a real interest in, aren't we? So this chapter is to know how your landlord is performing, and that includes on repairs, on complaints, safety. There's stuff in here about how your landlord spends its money, and crucially, there's the line so you can hold it to account. Haven't we talked a lot about that as Tpas members over the last few years? So what's been proposed in the white paper, and I haven't put them up here because they are subject to change, is a set of tenant satisfaction measures for landlords to measure on the things that matter to tenants. Now, they're in there, you can go and have a look at them. There's qualitative and quantitative stuff in there. My sense is, from talking to quite a few people this week, is that they are going to be open to negotiation and change. Once these are given to the regulator of social housing to look after. So MHCLG will kind of hand them over. They'll come to the regulator. There will be opportunity, I think, to influence, and that we really want to take a role in that as Tpas, and I know you as members will as well. We must grasp that opportunity to do that. I think there's things in there that are okay. They're fine. You'd kind of expect them to be there. But I think we'd want to make sure we were seeing measures that are really about tenant perception as well. Performance has got to be linked to tenant perception. That's really, really important. I think what you haven't seen appear in the white paper, and sort of in this section, is anything about league tables, because you all pushed back on that, didn't you? You mentioned, well, you stated clearly that league tables are not the answer. It doesn't necessarily drive the right performance that we're looking for. But of course, we are going to need some measures to measure people against. So we make the point though as well that you'll have all done lots of work on local measures. And again, that's really important that we keep those. So how the regulator will kind of manage this big box that will cover the whole country, that will all be regulated against, as well as actually what's really important as well as those local ones. We'll wait to see. Some other things that are in there is new access to information for social housing tenants and housing associations. So this is kind of GDPR territory, freedom of information stuff that local authority tenants already had. We've not had it for housing associations quite the same way, and obviously there's been a lot of chatter on that already over the last couple of days. There's an article in Inside Housing for those of you who want to have a look at that, about the cost and potentially what this could slow down in terms of housing associations. But I think the principle, it's got to be right. We should be sharing stuff with tenants and making sure we give as much information as we can. We like there's some bits in here that puts local authority tenants, TMOs, and housing associations much more on equal footing in places. Some of that tidying up's happened in here, so that's good to see. Like I mentioned before, there has to be a senior person in the organisation now named about to ensure they comply with consumer standards. So again, to reiterate, somebody for health and safety now, and a named person for consumer standards. Now that's important. It's important because I think, again, at the road shows, if you were there, people talked about that, didn't they? Accountability, knowing who to go to, who's responsible, can't hide behind anything, all of these things. So I think that's really important. But it's going to be important to see who we recruit or who we pick, if you like, for those roles. And will they be able to drive some of the change and raise standards that we're looking for? So a crucial role, I think, there for somebody. Obviously, get some headlines, things like executive pay. So chief exec pay is mentioned in there. That's going to be very open. It's going to be published. Breakdown of spending. Again, we have nothing to fall out with any of that. We like the focus on transparency. It needs to be clear what the purpose of that is and what it's trying to drive, but I'm sure we can have those debates together. And we like the point around kind of continuous improvement and continuing to look at best practice. Again, when I got my briefing on Monday from one of the from MHCLG, that was stressed to me, that that continuous looking for best practice, continuous improvement that they're looking for, that they're hoping this new white paper brings in. So I think, again, being part of Tpas membership, I'm not just being glib there, but we all need to think about that, don't we? How do sessions like this contribute to you as landlords and as involved tenants, making sure you're constantly looking for what the best practice is out there and what you can do better. So we're generally pleased with most of the stuff that's in there, but we would sort of make some of the points around getting these measures right. Say it again, opportunity for influence, let's take it. We want to make sure they're proportionate. We make to make sure it doesn't distract from the day job and of getting the basics right. We don't just want to be kind of KPI chasing as a sector, do we? But basically, we also want to make sure that if you name somebody and we agree that that's a good idea, the responsibility still lies with boards, still lies with kind of, local authority members, and making sure it's a collective responsibility still as well to deliver services. So, but lots generally in there. I think obviously what we will talk about a lot is these draft tenant satisfaction measures, and that's fine. Let's keep talking about those as they look to shape. I'm going to sneeze, just bear with me. There we go. Quick sneeze going on there. So I think it's just my dusty house. Okay, so next one is chapter 3. I'll speed up a bit. So this is around complaints. So to have your complaints dealt with promptly and fairly, with access to a strong ombudsman who will give you swift and fair redress when needed. Again, complaints was a biggie, wasn't it, from the road shows if you were at them. We talked about this consistently about all the things we've mentioned before, getting stuck in a myriad of issues to try and get a complaint heard. The frustration of thinking, I just wanted to raise a quick issue. It was just a small problem that could have been resolved with a bit of common sense and a quicker process or whatever it was. And yet I got stuck and people felt they were being deliberately stopped from making complaints. This is trying to deal with all of that and push that forward. So a lot of this we've seen already. So what I talked about earlier on, the Ombudsman in particular has made great strides over the last year, 18 months. It's about tying up, removing the democratic filter, which was already trailed in the Building Safety Bill. It talks about the stronger action that the Housing Ombudsman is going to take. And again, you can't fail to pick that up over the last year, certainly in the last couple of months that's come in with the new code. We really want to support the Housing Ombudsman. We think it's important that it's visible, that it's accessible, that it's really transparent. It needs more resources. It's got more resources coming. That's important. But we know landlords are going to be named more in the future for their complaints handling, and this really should drive people looking at their complaints processes. If you haven't already, I know we're talking about complaints a bit later on, and make sure we're getting that right. I mean, we just should be getting complaints right in this sector, shouldn't we? We've got enough learning out there. There's enough good practice. We've now got the Ombudsman behind us to try and make this happen. We can make some great strides on this if we want to as a sector, and see complaints what we should see them as useful intelligence. What else is in there? I'm looking at my screen on to the side to show you you've gathered that. There's an awareness campaign apparently going to be planned for social housing residents about their rights, how to make a complaint, how to escalate a complaint. And again, if any of the road shows, but particularly the road shows which involved Grenfell survivors, it was startling, wasn't it? I've said this many times about how they had no idea where they could have gone to complain. Just no idea whatsoever that there was anybody, even obviously back then with much reduced powers. We will be interested to see what that awareness campaign looks like. It's not going to be easy. We can get to involve tenants. You're all here, and landlords have a role to play in kind of pushing the message out a little bit further. But how big that campaign is going to be will be something we'll be watching, because we've got a lot to do to make sure this white paper penetrates, the wider tenant populace out there. I'm be really interested actually in all of your views on how we can do that and help contribute to that with MHCLG. So a lot of this was already in hand. It's just about making it more formal, and we will do everything we can to make sure the Ombudsman has the opportunities to talk direct to you on the things that matter to you. We'll continue to support them. Okay, so moving swiftly on then now to chapter 4, which is important, isn't it, for us around consumer regulator. Everybody, that if you can remind ourselves about the green paper and what the Tpas response was, informed by you as members, was we wanted a robust regulator, and we wanted to see consumer regulation. We've talked about being muscular and proactive, and I think we're going to get that here in this section. So what is good in this? Again, some of it is mopping up things that have happened, but a lot of it is going to be new stuff which will require legislative change. So do not expect this to happen overnight. Some of this is going to have to be laid before Parliament. We know there's a lot going on from Parliament, both with Brexit and the pandemic, as well as everything else. So, you know, don't expect this all to be quick. However, equally, don't be despondent, because again, a lot of this just means it's going to start happening anyway. It will run kind of alongside. The regulators have been very clear in trailing this for a while now. So whilst the powers might not arrive on day one, what will happen is the train is always happening already. So I've said that a few times, I won't say it again, but I just want to absolutely hammer that home, that this is going to happen, but it might take, some bits will take time. So it's going to be proactive regulation by the regulator of social housing. I'm going to pause there to say we're pleased to see that it is the current regulator that's taking this on. Again, some of you will recall that the Shelter Commission did a report that they called for a separate consumer regulator. And I've said many times we understood the reason for that call. Absolutely, we hope we understood it. But our view, informed by you, was that actually to stay with the current regulator was probably the right decision, given the speed that things could happen with them, and the fact that the current regulator already looks after the economic standards around governance and viability and value for money. And I just think, you know, making sure that consumer regulation is in the same place means that we can make real impacts on this. So we're pleased that it's stayed with the current regulator. I think the sector should, you know, there's things wrong, but generally I think we can be quite pleased with our regulator that we've got, and I think we'll really try to make things better. So there's going to be inspections. Inspections is back in terms of consumer regulation every 4 years for landlords with more than 1,000 homes. And there will also be short notice property condition surveys as well. So, you know, lots for people to think about there that they look after properties. Those results will be published, and landlords will have to agree a performance improvement plan if needed. So lots going on. It removes the serious detriment test, which, you know, is this ridiculously high threshold to get any of the consumer standards breached. We've all talked about this regularly, haven't we? It's ridiculous. I think it helps everybody in the sector, whatever role you're in, tenant, staff member, contractor, whoever you are. I think that helps. That's now gone, and it had really restricted the regulator's ability to act, you know, even before. Lots going on around. There's a lot in here. So around, you know, the regulators putting some shot across the bows around the relationships with local authorities to TMOs and ALMOs, that, you know, they won't stand for any contracts between the local authority and the ALMO, for example, stopping them getting in and doing their job. So interesting dynamic to watch over the next couple of years. And then there's also some stuff around sort of not for-profit organisations that's probably a bit more technical that you could have a proper read on. So basically, we're effectively going into IDAs for consumer regulation that will involve some desktop reviews, maybe once a year, and then a risk-based programme. You know, it will be based again around risk. What organisations do they think they need to go in to have a look at their consumer regulation? It will also be reactive in terms of this memorandum of understanding with the Ombudsman. So what's the Ombudsman telling the regulator about what's coming in complaints-wise? But it's, you know, this will trigger, hopefully, some different behaviours, some different systems within organisations. To say, we've got to get consumer regulation right, because the regulator is going to be listening. I know many of you have got nothing to fear by this at all. I think I'm sort of saying that in many places. Good landlords have got nothing to fear from this white paper. You'll have been doing loads of this already, or you've seen where the wind's blowing, and hopefully we've been part of helping you, you know, to know where the wind's blowing, and you'll have been putting these things in train already. So I don't think there's anything to fear if you are a landlord that is doing stuff well and is involved in tenants. Of course, there's more we can all be doing, but this regulation should not give fear to anybody. Certainly not Tpas members, I would like to think. So I think we should let's pause and let's be a little bit proud of ourselves that we've all helped to shape this to get to this regulatory change that we were all talking for. You know, this is good. This is good stuff. You know, serious detriment going. democratic filter going, getting robust consumer regulation. These are good things that we've been asking for a while. Okay, and let's just move on. So again, a big chapter for us here, to have your voice heard by your landlord through regular meetings, scrutiny panels, being on the board, and giving the tools to do this. Just lack a bit of detail, this chapter, I've got to say. However, you know, the intention is right and it's good. I mentioned before, it's talking about seeking out best practice and making sure you continually engage. There's going to be a commitment around ongoing ministerial engagement to listen to residents and have their voice heard. Don't know what that means in detail or practice, but we would hope it would mean the ministers are coming out and listening again. Well, let's hope so. Potentially a new opportunities and empowerment programme for social housing residents. And again, those of you that have been around with Tpas for a long time, I know we've been part of that programme in the past. We would certainly look to hope we're part of it in the future, but it's bigger than that. It's not about whether Tpas are involved or not. It's about saying that actually, if we want to really make sure as many tenants in this country are getting engaged in the ways that this white paper wants them to, then there needs to be some awareness raising, there needs to be some training, there needs to be some resourcing that goes alongside that. You know, we ask a lot, I think, of volunteers and resident volunteers in this country. We can't keep asking for all of that if we want to fulfil some of the ambitions in this white paper. So let's keep an eye out on that. I think there's stuff in here about professional training and development, and again, you know, that's great to see. You know, we know CIH are doing some work on professional standards for the sector, but this got mentioned a lot, didn't it, at the road shows? Tenants particularly talking about saying, you know, we're not convinced we're always seeing skilled, knowledgeable, or staff behaving, displaying the right behaviours to social housing tenants. And so I think anything that starts to do some more work on that is a good thing. So we'll continue to support that. And there's stuff in there as well around mental health. Some more stuff you need to read in that chapter. But generally, it's a funny title, I suppose. That's what I'd probably reflect on a little bit on this one, to have your voice heard by your landlord. Because we talked a lot, don't we, saying you might have your voice heard, but do they then act on it? Do they really listen? Do they do anything with it? So I think, you know, there's two sides to this, isn't it? We can have the mechanisms, have your voice heard, but then what happens then in terms of what the outputs are and the outcomes from that. So, and your voice heard how? I mean, lots of different ways for that to manifest itself. I'm sure you'll hear some more about that in your sessions later. So again, another step forward, I think, in many ways. Okay, chapter 6. Again, this probably, you can probably feel this directly from kind of the green paper. To have a good quality home and neighbourhood to live in. It's about keeping your home in good repair. A lot in this chapter about, you know, around reviewing the decent home standards. I think we all knew that was coming. About energy efficiency, improving communal and green spaces. A bit light on detail, got to be said, but you know, these things are in there for more discussion. Impacts of housing conditions on health, and again, certainly around tables at the roadshows I was at, this got mentioned quite a lot. The link between kind of health and housing and what more we could do on that. Stuff in here about working, how well housing staff are equipped to work with people with mental health needs. So again, that's really pleasing to see some movement on that. Stuff in there around clarifying roles and antisocial behaviour, allocations, quite a bit in here. Probably need some more thinking about. And one particular detail we were happy to see, and I'm sure you're the same, that making it clear landlords should have a policy on how they tackle issues surrounding domestic abuse. And I know those of you that know Alison Inman well, you'll know when it was her CIH presidential year, she did a lot of work in bringing this to the table. So it's good to see again that work coming to fruition here. We know decent home standards out of date. We know we need better stuff around this. So there's a lot of work. I mean, I think I'll say that about this chapter. But generally, we need to make sure though that some of the things in here are kind of words, not actions. And I think that's where we'll have a role as time goes on to make sure this isn't just warm words, but what does this actually mean? And that it's not just put on housing. This is not just a social housing landlords issue to address, is it? Neighbourhoods do not exist just for social housing landlords. There's a myriad of people working in there. So I think there was a bit of a sense for us in this chapter that it was like, oh, it kind of, I think it's your problem. We need to think about wider government policy on this one as well in particular. And then the final one is chapter 7, to be devoted to your first step to ownership. Nothing particularly new initiatives, particularly in this. It's a summary of what the government has already announced, mainly around home ownership, new shared ownership model, stuff around help to buy, lots of things. It's not quite engagement, is it? So I'm not going to spend too long. I think the sense from most of us is it's disappointing this chapter that it was in there. A lot of the rest of the white paper I've been talking about tenants' voices being heard, consumer regulation, really trying to move the dial on engagement in particular. This just jars, it just doesn't fit right. It still it perpetuates a bit of a narrative around we should aspire to have more than social housing, we should aspire to kind of move on from social housing, which none of us here agree with that. And so I think, you know, that chapter is disappointing, but not unexpected that it's in there. But, you know, it is what it is, and we'll have to keep pushing and making the case for social housing. There's a couple of things just very quickly to say up before Louise loses it with me that I'm so over time. I think basically, from my perspective, what's not in here is anything about a national voice for tenants. So that's a gap. That's not been specifically mentioned, and I think that's a shame. So we need to come back and talk about that. Stigma, I think we've been training this for a while, isn't in there as a topic in its own right. But I think what the government has tried to do, how they've tried to do it, is tag it through various mechanisms. So by doing consumer regulation, all of these things, and the ombudsman, and trying to give more tools, the awareness raising, they think that's tackles stigma. I think the jury's out on that. I think there's more work that we can do. Quite a lot of talking here about culture as well. And we know that's not easy, don't we? I mean, our accreditation standards, our national Tpas standards talk about culture being the key. It talks about it a lot, but I'm not sure what practical solutions it's giving because it's a biggie, isn't it? Now, regulation is a big part of it. But, you know, regulation shouldn't drive behaviour and culture change in the same way. So it's something to think about there. I think I have to say again what I said at the start. Yeah, we're going to work with members. We'll work to shape and influence it. There is an opportunity to work and shape. I'm going to keep saying that because I don't want people to get hung up what's missing. We can try and fill in some of that gap over time. I think we're back a little bit here. I was just speaking at a housing management conference before I came on here, and I was a bit late, and which was booked in before the white paper. And you know, some of this is about we've got to get our basics right. We've got to get back to basics, get our housing management right, get repairs right, get our complaints handling right. And none of this needs to scare us, and good landlords and involved tenants like we are, in getting some of this right. We've got to create meaningful mechanisms for engagement. I think that's key. It will not be good enough, and you know, thankfully we're not in that space as Tpas members, are we, to say, oh, I've got a list, I've got some opportunities to engage, I can tick a box, and that's good enough. Or, oh, I've got a tenant on the board. No, that's not going to be good enough. That is not meaningful engagement. And I think I do think this white paper, the charter, just try to say it's got to be far, far more than that. So just to sum up, it is a direction of travel we're very interested in. We will want to be landing our Tpas member views as much as possible to the next stage. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've all got to say about it. Thank you. I think I'm handing back to Louise, I think. Or I'll take questions if anybody's got questions.
Sorry, Jenny. Yeah, just getting myself off mute there. Thank you ever so much for that. Really interesting to just get some insights and some detail as well around the chapters, and some thoughts as well about the things that are perhaps not there as well as the things that are. So we are running slightly behind time. So I just want to say to Jenny, thank you ever so much. We're not going to have time for questions today, but the good news is we're going to be running many more events after this, and I know Jenny's committed to joining us on those as well. So there will be an opportunity to ask Jenny questions at our forthcoming white paper events. But I don't want to keep our presenters waiting too long, Jenny, but big thank you to yourself, and I hope that's been helpful for everyone really to hear your thoughts on that. So thank you, Jenny. Okay, as I said, we are running slightly behind, but we're forever the optimist that we will catch up and we will finish as scheduled. But what I wanted to just say is this next bit is really important because it does bring to life some of the things that are in the white paper that Jenny's really gone through. And I'm really pleased to introduce the first section of this, and this is around complaints. I mean, clearly, big part of the white paper. It's got a whole chapter. It's there in the charter, and I think it's really important that we start exploring, you know, what does excellence look like? How can organisations really make sure that they're dealing with things around complaints promptly and fairly? So I'm delighted to welcome two organisations who've got some excellent practice around complaints. We've got Together Housing and we've got For Housing joining us today. And they're just going to talk through what they do and what journey they've been on around complaints and hopefully give some insight and some best practice. So I think first up we've got John Loads from Together Housing. I hope John is with us. I think he is. And I'm going to hand over to yourself now, John, to take us through what you're doing at your organisation.
Thank you very much. It's lovely of you to invite me along to have a few words about what we've done at Together Housing. I'm the resolution manager at Together Housing. We've got 36,000 properties across the north of England, and Together Housing is an association brought together by 5 previous housing associations. Together Housing was Twin Valley Homes, Housing Pendle, Shevin, Pennine Housing 2000, and we've come together to be this organisation with those properties. Obviously, as we heard from Jenny, that the complaint handling code is one of the key things that's come out of recent offerings from within the white paper from the Ombudsman. And obviously the self-assessment from that has been an opportunity for us to look at how we, compare really against the requirements of that code. When I joined Together Housing, when Together Housing came together, we had obviously 5 different complaint management systems, complaint management processes, and so on and so forth. And it was quite difficult to understand the best way of capturing this valuable feedback from our residents. We kind of brought it together under our housing management system, and that was a system that had a complaint management module within it. Unfortunately, it was quite complex, and at that point we had a very much devolved complaint system where managers were responsible really for their own complaints and updating the system accordingly. We very quickly found that that wasn't working particularly well because there was a lot of complaints being captured but not actually handled particularly well, or that the resident was kept uninformed as progress. And it wasn't closed down on the system, and of course nobody knew where these complaints were at. One of the things we did look at was our antisocial behaviour triage system, because that looked to me to be a way of understanding the severity or the nature of the complaint, and to try and understand how we can deal with it at the point of first contact, or whether it needed escalating. Part of the review also included a look at our own complaints processes and how we could improve that. And it was great that I was given the opportunity to formulate a small team, because if you remember, we have 36,000 properties and we only had me and one other person to look at complaint management. So it was quite a task. What we decided to do was to formulate a resolution team. And the role of that resolution team was to start bringing together the issues and understand the issues that were being reported and reporting them properly and more effectively. We changed the system so that it was less complex, so that people out in the field, the managers, housing officers, neighbourhood officers, sorry, were able to engage with the system more easily. And again, that's a big thing for us. But more that we had a team really that was a point of contact for our residents to chase up on things that maybe weren't being done, and so on and so forth. So our resolution team is now 2 people, 2 very experienced members of Together Housing, one from the contact centre and one from the antisocial behaviour team. And they now work together really to help manage our complaint system, which is a 2-stage but 3-part process. Sounds a bit odd, and I know the Ombudsman don't like 3-stage processes, but we have an initial contact. Obviously, people will ring in and say, I'm not happy with X, Y, or Z. So we then triage that through the contact centre for them to understand, well, what is a complaint and how is this going to be best handled? They would then pass it forward to possibly a technician or a technician's team leader to resolve that issue. So that's what we call a get it sorted process. And we will try and get that sorted within 5 days. We make sure that we record that process and what's been told to the resident and what's been informed and what they're going to get, what's going to happen and when. And we as the resolution team are able to monitor these get it sorted, how they're logged on the system, to make sure that we can support our technicians, team leaders and so on, to make sure that they don't go overdue. Our overdues previously was quite shocking, to be honest, as you can imagine, because we were relying on people to close their own complaints down. Now it's gone from over 50% plus overdue to, well, this last month it was just over 10%. So we've had massive improvements in our overdues. Equally, our resolution team monitor MP contacts as well, and that is another thing that has been a really good positive move, is that MPs can contact us through our websites and everything, and our resolution team are the ones that manage those MP contacts and information to get them a positive feedback as quickly as possible. The resolution team also deal with multi-service complaints, and again that was one that sometimes took quite a lot of energy from certain departments, where somebody was complaining about rents, repairs, condition of property or whatever. So the resolution team now take on any multi-service complaints and bring all that information together as a resolution for the customer and the resident at one point, so that all multi-service complaints are brought together. The other thing that we do is manage the stage 1. So our 2 stages, if we can't get it sorted, or things are, or the resident isn't happy that our resolution at the first stage was adequate enough, they can ask for an escalation up to a stage 1 investigation. And that's where the resolution team again come into their own, because they will work with the manager to ensure that the response is timely and effective and meets the needs of the resident as well as the business. I like to see the resolution team really as a quality department in a way, because we are independent from all of the service areas. And it is something that I'm proud of, that we can take both the resident side, but equally we can look at it from our business side as well. But I think we take a real pride in also standing up for our residents to make sure they get the service that they deserve if it has been seen to be wanting. So there's a consistency there. And again, the resolution team was also born out of the feedback that we did get from a resident event, some time ago, that they wanted a point of contact, our residents, to make sure that there was somebody to turn to. And we've developed this resolution team to be a resource for our staff as much as it is for our residents as well. So we monitor and support. We also offer the opportunity to record dissatisfaction if it's not a complaint, or it's it's something that people aren't happy with, but we're doing it within current policy. We will still capture that information to ensure that we can monitor dissatisfaction, and maybe at some point have a look at those and say, well, actually, is our policy right? And is it something that we need to look at, in the wider sense? So we have got a range of mechanisms to capture this dissatisfaction and to make sure that we understand what is needed for our customers and residents. So the self-assessment has given us an opportunity to look at that, and I'm pleased to say that obviously with the formation of the resolution team, we ticked a lot of those boxes, which was really good. But even still, we knew that the complaints policy needed to be reviewed and better reflect the requirements of the complaint handling code. So we've been working through the complaint handling code and also our already published complaints policy. I'm pleased to say that my colleague Debbie Potter is part of this meeting today, and I just wanted to say how great it is that, you know, the resident engagement side of it has supported us in making sure that we go out with our draft policy changes and really make sure that the residents have a true engagement with our changes to make sure that they meet their requirements, and that the discretion that the Ombudsman gives us is met with a fair and you know, reasonable approach to our complaint handling processes. So I'm really pleased that our policy, our draft policy, is currently or very shortly going to over 2,500 of our virtual voice tenants for them to contribute to the formation of this policy that is so important. Equally, our self-assessment is also being looked at by our scrutiny members of our scrutiny group, our engaged residents through scrutiny. So that is also being scrutinised to make sure that when we do publish it at the 31st of December, that it is published in a way that is meaningful for our residents as well, and that they can understand where we're coming from, and that the points that we're making as part of our self-assessment publication, that it is actually meaningful for our residents and they can understand where we're coming from. So that's really a bit of our journey, really. We've gone from a devolved complaints setup to a more controlled and managed system through the resolution team. They are a point of contact for residents and our staff. And I think we've seen some massive improvements in ensuring that the service we provide to our customers is far better now that we've got the resolution team, and that the self-assessment really is reinforcing some of the good stuff, but it's also helping us to inform areas where we could do a little bit better and improve our services to our residents. And that, of course, again, is supported by the fact that we're sending this out and engaging residents in the policy development so that it's as good as it can be.
Okay,
Questions?
that's great, John. Yeah, I'm gonna take questions after the next presentation, because again, just time, and the other presentations about complaints as well. But just to say a big thank you for that. Really interesting stuff. Love the way that you're connecting it up with your scrutiny panel, and you're using it as a way to listen to the residents' voice, along with all your other engagement stuff as well. So fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Okay.
I'm going to now bring in Jackie from 4 Housing, who's also going to talk a bit about their complaints and how they approach that. So I hope Jackie's with us and can hear me.
I am, and I can, thank you.
Lovely. Over to yourself, Jackie. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just hopefully going to share my screen with you because I have a very short PowerPoint. Technology is not my forte, so if it goes wrong, we'll just talk through as we did before. So just give me a second to do that.
No, that's fine, Jackie. You're amongst people who share the same sort of fears and worries about technology.
I'm a people person, not a technology person, but I have it now. Just bear with me.
Lovely.
Screen
Good.
share. Okay, so similarly, we started some time ago looking at our complaints process, and that was triggered by a scrutiny exercise. So the scrutiny panel looked at our complaints process, and some of the feedback for them was that we didn't particularly demonstrate what we learned from an informal complaint, and that we didn't really take complaints seriously until they became a formal stage 1 complaint. And some of that around being tenant satisfaction, around the time scales, the communication, people thinking they'd complained, they'd not complained, people having to speak to lots of different people about where their complaint was up to. So for us, that triggered us to have a look at our complaints process. And we did actually at that time have what we called a Get It Sorted team, who did exactly what John mentioned before. They looked at getting it sorted. Some of the issues for us with Get It Sorted was it wasn't centrally controlled by the feedback team, and I'll talk through some of the difficulties of it before, but like Together Housing, we have a feedback team now who centrally coordinate, monitor, quality check all of the complaints process throughout the organisation. the first thing to say is you'll notice the presentation title is Redress and the Insight Engine. And I think that was the big cultural shift for us, was internally we call the complaints process now our redress process. And it was just something around the cultural change of complaints were seen as negative, and it looked like we were trying to not get complaints at every opportunity to brush them under the carpet. Whereas now it's about the cultural shift around actually an expression of dissatisfaction. Redress is the opportunity to put right what's gone wrong. So internally now it is called the redress. So I'll just cover a bit of our journey and then just touch on the end what we do with the information feedback we get from complaints. So the principles of redress for us come round to what we call the 4 R's of redress. So what we found is people mostly just want a remedy. So when they've got complaint or they're dissatisfied with the service or lack of, they just want a remedy. The next thing is they want some recognition, and not just recognition of, yes, we did something wrong or failed to deliver something, but actually the impact that had on people. And I think that came strongly out of the scrutiny exercise, that some of these complaints, there are people's lives behind that, and we need to take that into consideration. Fourthly, people want reassurance, and that's reassurance around it's not going to happen again. We'll do something about it. And finally, they want recompense. But what we found is most people who complain to us just want us to put it right and recognise where we went wrong. Actually, the number of people who are asking for any kind of recompense, never mind financial, is very, very low out of our complaints. So there are 4 principles of redress. So for us, changing our process was more about making it a much better customer experience. So really looking at it from the customer experience point of view. So we now have an early triage and de-escalation, but the difference for us is that anybody who takes an expression of dissatisfaction becomes that case officer to triage that. In the service centre, we do have 2 case officers. So anything that comes through the service centre goes to the 2 case officers, but neighbourhood staff, myself, anybody else taking an expression of dissatisfaction would triage that in the early days with support of a triage document, which has been developed again with customer input over what is and isn't a complaint. And we kind of shifted from saying anything isn't a complaint really until we get to the end of the process with it. We now have a prompt negotiated remedy. So we also said that we would put something right within 5 days. And that was our kind of get it sorted team. But what we've realised is you can't put everything right within 5 days. And there was an opportunity for people then to, for an example, a kitchen worktop, we agree what we would do. That's not delivered on time. So we just shift the date. Some of our complaints were going on for like 80+ days. People weren't even sure whether they'd complain or just requested another repair. So now they have 2 days to inform the complainant what the remedy will be and when that remedy will be delivered. We have a single point of contact. So whoever triages that and takes the first expression will remain the point of contact with that tenant until either the complaint's resolved or it's been escalated to the next stage. So internally, we're running around finding and delivering remedies, but from a tenant perspective, that tenant is still dealing with me, Jackie, because I took that expression. There's a choice to escalate in our new process. So what we realised before, we almost said either we can put it right or we can formally investigate it. So we've kind of dropped the word informal now. You can still just say, yes, I'm happy with the remedy you're offering me, but actually I want you to investigate it at the same time because I still want to know why it went wrong in the first place. So that's quite a choice element now. The other choice in there, which is kind of really new to us, is if me as the person taking that complaint is not happy with what, say, the repairs team are offering our tenant as a remedy, I can now say I want that investigating because as an officer, I don't think that's a reasonable offer to a tenant, even if they're prepared to accept it. We also have an automatic escalation now. So at every point, if you fail to deliver, it gets escalated to the next stage. So take the kitchen worktop. If we say to you, right, the remedy is a new kitchen worktop by the 5th of December. If that's not happened, the 6th of December, that automatically escalates. Once they're escalated, they come back to the feedback team. So we would assign that to a manager. there's a rapid progression. So as I said before, and as John said in his discussions, is some complaints can go on for a very long time. What we've done by the automatic escalation and the negotiation at the beginning is speeded that process up. So the minute something fails its target, it now gets investigated. We have 10 days to investigate. If we don't do that, don't come back with a reasonable response to that, or fail to deliver any other identified remedies, again, it gets escalated. So the whole process from an expression of dissatisfaction to a stage 2 hearing is less than 28 days now. There's regular personalised contact. So some of the criticism was we just do an investigation based on the information we've got. Nobody would talk to the tenant. They just get this final letter. So in the process now, if you're assigned an investigation, you have 2 days to contact the tenant and talk through what that looks like to them prior to doing the investigation. One of the other criticisms about the informal complaints is we just went away and delivered or didn't deliver, and we closed the complaint on the system. Whoever is that case officer now has to check with the tenant that they're happy that that's been delivered and that we can close it, so that we're really closing that loop for them, which is a big thing. And again, there's an independent and partial review. So the fact that it's done by the feedback team allows us to oversee the quality of what's going out, the standard of responses, how consistent teams are at delivering what they're delivering. So we have a real overview of making sure wherever you are in the business, you get the same, deliver the same service. I think the biggest change for us has been about the cultural change, and the training has really focused on this around people's attitude and behaviour. So it is about it being a positive that we get such feedback. It's free, valuable feedback. It's not a negative complaint anymore. It's about showing empathy and compassion. So really looking at it from how that has impacted the person receiving or not receiving the service, and accepting criticism, like not being defensive of we would never do that wrong. It's about accept that criticism. Sometimes we do things wrong, acknowledge that and the impact that's had on somebody, and taking ownership and responsibility really. So we've just taken out the opportunity to pass somebody from pillar to post. It's about, if I have taken your complaint, it's my responsibility to get that resolution to you and make sure that's delivered for you. And again, the biggest thing is the learning opportunities from it. So not be so hung up on the number of complaints we get. The number doesn't really matter. It's what we do with it and how we identify that feedback that's important to us. So that's been the big change for us. Just very quickly now, we have an insight engine now. So we take the feedback, we do all these things to come out with a root cause analysis and create that into insight. So as a team, we're really looking at actually what is that telling us. So it's not just saying we've had 50 complaints. It's about what was the detail of those? What can we learn from that? So we take the complaints, customer satisfaction, compliments, information from tenants groups. So that's not just involved tenant groups, everywhere we might get feedback. Our team take that in and do some work with that. We do case conferences. So weekly, we analyse all the complaints coming in and look for trends of what's happening, where it's happening, region. Is it a region? Is it a particular trade with the repairs? We do 3 full case reviews every week. So we'll walk through a complaint from start to finish, checking the process, was the outcome fair, the standard of the response fair. We create a summary report of all the complaints, which we share with the service leads, and quarterly a headline report where we've done a bit more work to say, this is what that's telling you, you've got a problem here that needs to be looked at. And a PI report goes to different people, and annually we'll do kind of a whole big summary report. Basically says what's happening, why it's happening, and what we can do about it. But the big thing in all of those is there's an onus on the management team to come back to us and say, this is what we're putting right because of what you told us the complaints are telling us, and then for that to be tested by a scrutiny panel, mystery shoppers, etc. So there's a real feel for not just taking the complaints, but actually delving into them and feeding back on what we're going to do about what those complaints are telling us. That's basically me.
No, that's really good, Jackie. Thank you ever so much again for sharing that. Some really good stuff in there. I haven't got a chance to sort of unpick it because obviously I'm mindful of time, but thank you ever so much because I think there's been some excellent sharing of good practice. I'm very mindful of time and I am going to make the decision that I'm not going to take questions from people. What I am going to do is encourage you to pop them in the chat. We will pick them up from there and then we will put them to the presenters and get a written response to people. So apologies for that, but I'm just really mindful that we are overrunning in terms of our time. So big thank you to both John and Jackie for sharing with us their presentations. And if there are slides that are available, we will get them out to people as well. So those will be on the way. Okay, so I want to bring in now Hull and West Kent, Hull Council and West Kent Housing Association, who are going to talk a little bit around stigma and stereotyping. It may not feature as much as we may have wanted in the white paper, but if you read through some of the themes and some of the sort of inferences, it's certainly there. So what we wanted to do with this this section is pick up some of the good practice that's happening already in terms of tackling stigma and stereotyping. So I'm going to bring in Hull first, and I think we've got Darren and Anne from Hull. We're just going to talk through some of their practice and what they've been doing to try and tackle that. So Darren and Anne, can you hear me all right?
Yes,
I can.
Yeah.
Okay, up to yourselves then.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see that the white paper does recognise the importance of See the Person campaign. It's actually mentioned in there, along with Tpas, its recognition of Tpas, together with tenants, the NHF and the CIH are all mentioned, so they are recognised. And we realise that our contribution as residents and tenants was to get across the fact that we needed to be listened to. Tenants need to be listened to, not just heard. Jenny mentioned that when she was speaking earlier. There's a difference between hearing what somebody's got to say and really properly listening. Personally, I feel that I am listened to with respect from Hull City Council, and my other fellow volunteers feel the same. But as a committed member of the See the Person campaign, I'm passionate about reaching out to other housing providers to get a grip on this stigma that's caused by the way that people are addressing people who live in social housing. We're always going to have challenging tenants, but they have the right to be heard as well. So here are a few of the things that we've been doing to support the campaign in Hull. And Darren's got 1 or 2 points that he'd like to share with you.
Sorry, Anne, we seem to have a telephone going off. I don't know if pop that on mute or just maybe silence it some way.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. You're a popular lady, Anne.
Could you hear what I was saying?
Yeah, it didn't spoil it at all. I just didn't want it to cut into to Darren. So we'll pass to Darren now. Thank you, Anne. Really good.
Thank you, Anne. Hull City Council sponsored the campaign and have 2 representatives on the National Committee. We visited the House of Commons to watch Diana Johnson sign the pledge to support the See the Person campaign to end unfair and unhelpful stereotyping of social housing tenants. The pledge was also signed by our Chief Executive of Hull City Council, the Holder for Housing, the Assistant Director of Neighbourhood and Housing, and the local newspaper. Campaign via our engagement activities such as TARAs, Tenants Forum and our other project groups. We wrote to and met with local MPs and councillors to raise awareness, and we promoted the campaign on 10 participation social media platforms.
Thanks, Darren. The recent publication of the It's Not OK guide that we worked with along with the Chartered Institute of Housing has been circulated throughout our team, our officers team. So it's gone to all the housing staff, the contractors, the registered social landlords, and it's been promoted on social media channels and in the housing newsletter. And we have just done a recent video that's going to be put onto Facebook as well. So the thing is that we have got a lot of tenants out there. The majority of our tenants are all hard-working people that work for the core industries of the country, and it's them that we want to support by getting rid of this stereotyping of the certain type of person that lives in social housing. So I feel that Hull have still got a lot to do to keep this campaign going, but we have made a good start. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks to Anne and Darren. And I think it's really great to just see how you've just got hold of this in Hull. You've not waited, or you've not sat around and thought, we'll see what comes out in the white paper. You've just got hold of it, and you've really, you know, gone out there and made a difference, not only in your own communities, but across, you know, your area, in the organisation, and also taking it to the House of Commons and the MPs as well. So I think there's a lot to celebrate in terms of what Hull has done. And I just want to sort of say from Tpas, you know, we're very proud to sort of have you as members sharing your good practice, and really demonstrating, you know, what can be done through just getting up and getting on with it. So fair play to you. Some great examples there. Thank you to Anne and Darren for sharing that with us. Okay, I'm going to bring in then, I think, Diane Talbot from West Kent. I hope she can hear me. And
I can, Louise. Hi.
Hi there, Diane. Yeah, over to yourself.
Emma's just going to, I've got my colleague Emma Henry with me as well. She's just going to share her screen for a minute because we've got a bit of a presentation for you.
Excellent.
Okay. So thanks for inviting us along today to talk about our Superheroes campaign. This is a campaign that we ran during the first lockdown. Emma's going to flick through the slides as I talk. So I've told her to flick quickly so I talk faster, because both of us could talk for Britain. So just to introduce you to the team, it's me and 3 others, and we're not just responsible for resident involvement, we also do all the communications and marketing for the organisation. So what that means is that we're really well placed to get positive resident stories out to other residents so that people know what's going on. At the beginning of lockdown, we'd seen quite good levels of engagement already on our social media channels. This was a social media campaign. And Emma, who's going to talk to you in a minute, she's really good on social media and she's very creative. And we took a decision quite early on that we were going to be quite informal on our social media channels, and we weren't just going to use them to churn out corporate stuff. We ran that past our panel of residents and checked that they thought that was the right thing and that we weren't being too frivolous. And if you do have the time to go on and see what we'll do, you see that we try and bring in lighter things so that people engage with us, and it means that when we have got stories to get out there, we've already got the engagement. So that was where we were, that was where we were starting. So we saw the whole lockdown and COVID thing as a really good opportunity to showcase community spirit and again tackle stigma. At the time, there was quite a lot of, you probably remember, quite a lot of antisocial behaviour stories, but that wasn't our experience. We were hearing stories of people doing good things, and we thought, actually, let's focus on those, let's get them out there. And at the time, our chief executive was very clear that she didn't want us to use any kind of negative language around COVID. So we didn't talk about disasters or crisis or anything like that. We talked about the pandemic, and we kept it fairly factual. So we were coming into a sort of fairly positive environment anyway. So we've got this Facebook discussion group. It's a private discussion group for residents. We've got just over 100 members of that. And they're really good for giving us ideas and for us dropping in requests, and they give us things back. So this is where we first started looking for these stories. We also have a youth team who work in the communities, and they know people really well. So again, they brought good stories to us. Like most housing associations, we all made welfare calls at the beginning of lockdown to check on people who we thought might be vulnerable, and the team that were working on that were calling us as the comms team again, saying some really good stuff going on here, are you going to do anything about it? And one of the other places that we got stories for this campaign, but we get them all the time from, is our scheme managers. We've got a number of older person schemes, and the scheme managers are really good in those, and they do loads of engagement with their residents, and they again told us stories of good people that were happening. So with all of this information, Emma, who I'm going to hand you over to, put together a campaign, and she's just going to talk you through it quickly.
Can you hear me? I just want to check I'm off mute.
I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, so like Di said, we were really keen to share some positivity and kind of, you know, raise the profile of tenants that were really, you know, in their communities, either volunteering or working to, you know, to really get that kind of community spirit going and to keep the country going, really. And what we wanted to do was to do a different type of social media post. So often for social media, you do something very short, very snappy, because people think, well, no one's going to read it. But we were really keen to tell whole stories. We really wanted the voice of the tenants at the forefront of this, really, not our voices and not messages that we were trying to get across. So I don't know if anybody follows Humans of New York on Facebook, but they do these fantastic posts, which are really long stories about people's lives. So we just wanted to try it, really. And like Di says, you know, we were well supported to give these more creative things a bit of a go. And I had the privilege, really, of contacting tenants that had been nominated and just having a chat with them and say, can we share your story? Can you tell us what you're doing at the moment? And just on the right hand side of that slide, you can see what these posts look like. So they were very long. And I'm just going to go through really quickly and just share their stories, but I'm not conscious of the time, so I'll just be very quick. So this was Tina. She's a dementia care worker and West Kent tenant, and she also has a family and was delivering her mother-in-law's medication and roast dinner once a week. It was a really lovely story that we wanted to share, and she wrote a very long email to us, so we literally copied and pasted that email. So it was her voice and her story. It was actually her husband who nominated her. Her kids go to our youth clubs, and our youth team were checking in on whole families as well as the young people during the first lockdown. And her husband, Tina's husband, nominated her for a pamper pack that they were giving to some mums. So that's where we originally got in touch with Tina, and then I spoke to her and we shared her story, which was fantastic. And these are just some of the comments we had on the Facebook posts, which were just lovely. So obviously we were pleased with the reach and the engagement of the post, because it meant that lots of people were seeing these stories and seeing this positivity. But we were just, it was just a really happy thing to be involved in, really. And I'll just, you know, let you read those comments. The next one was Mrs. Smith. This is a lovely story. I kind of joined up working because Mrs. Smith was contacted by Pauline, who's actually one of our training and employment advisors, but she was redeployed to do some welfare checks. And she spoke with Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith said, I am desperate to sew some scrubs and face masks. I'm desperate to do it. I've got all the fabric that I've collected from my neighbours and local community. I've got a sewing machine, but I don't have a pattern. She just doesn't have a computer, doesn't have a printer, just has her phone. So we managed to find a pattern, email it to our facilities manager, who was still working in our offices. He printed it out, which was like 50 pages of A4 paper that then had to be stuck together, sent it off to Mrs. Smith. She managed to work her way through that pattern, and as you can see, she then ferociously sewed and sewed and sewed, and ended up actually creating hundreds and hundreds of scrubs, laundry bags and face masks. So that was a fantastic story to be able to share. And again, the positive reactions around that were just really incredible. Yeah, and a group of scrubbers, as they call themselves, contacted us as well to say they would happily supply patterns if anybody else needed them. Then we had lovely Betty, who is, again, she came to us through one of our welfare calls, But actually she was saying, oh, how funny that you're calling me, because that's what I do every day, because she was a volunteer at a daycare centre, at a day centre for older people, and when that shut down, she switched to phoning them all every day, and the kind of group that she normally supported at the centre. So she was making welfare calls every day, and again this was all her own words, and I just thought it was absolutely lovely. And she said it might not be much, but it's our little corner of the world, and we're keeping our community connected, and planning the party for when all of this is over, which was absolutely lovely. She was incredibly charming, Betty. And we actually sent, as a thank you for letting us kind of feature them, we sent these tenants all a little gift voucher, and she went out and she bought a plant when the garden centres opened and put it outside of the day centre, so that when the day centre clients came back, they would have something to kind of uplift them a bit. So that was lovely. And again, we had some nice reactions with that. Betty didn't want us to use her photo, and so it's quite interesting that you know the power of a picture could be quite impactful. So this post had slightly less reactions, but it was still a wonderful story, and we shared a condensed version of the story on Twitter as well. This is fabulous Jenny, who lives at one of our over 55 schemes, and she used to have the kind of job of befriending new tenants and helping them get settled in, but obviously with social distancing coming in and the communal area shutting, it became more of a challenge, so she volunteered to help deliver the lunches, so she became a lunchtime assistant, and it was lovely for everyone to see a friendly face delivering their meals to their door every day. So again, that was a fantastic story. And what was nice about some of the reactions to this is that we had other tenants who were, you know, saying how nice White Oak Court is and how nice it was that Jenny was helping out. So it just shows that we have quite a lot of our residents on following us on Facebook, and their families as well. And then finally moving on to Ben, who is a young man who decided to keep his neighbours entertained during lockdown by wearing his mascot costumes. So he uses these costumes at charity events, and he decided he'd put on a different outfit every day of the week, and entertain all the kids in his street. And he would make little creative packs and craft packs and post them through the door of neighbours with children as well. And Ben's mum contacted us to let us know that he was doing this, but one of his neighbours did as well, and just said, you know, they're so lucky to have such amazing neighbours, and their children were just delighted that Ben was doing these kind of daily praise just to kind of lift their day a bit. So again, a really, really lovely story. Lots and lots of fantastic feedback. It felt like, yeah, people were incredibly impressed with Ben being so young as well and wanting to do something so positive and uplifting for his community. And I'll hand back to Di now to talk about where else we shared those stories.
Yeah, so this was just really very quickly. If you get a good level of engagement and some good stories on social media channels, you don't have to end there really. And we still do a neighbourhood news that goes to all of our residents, so we featured it in there as well. So that's what this is, just showing you those pages. And again, we got some positive feedback from doing that as well. So just very quickly to finish, just our learning points from this were, as Emma's already said, if you get people to have their picture taken, it's much more powerful. People like to see people they know. We know our residents like to see stories about themselves, and that means that we get good engagement. Emma will talk to you for hours about algorithms and why it's important to get engagement on them, because it means that the stories that we need to drop into people's timelines do if we've got engagement on things that we've been doing previously. So just for example, with this one, after we ran this campaign, we then had to get some messages out about restarting our repair service. So we know those got to the people that they needed to go to. I've already said media stories that translate well, and just really, I'm really pleased that I fought to manage resident engagement as well at West Kent, because having the two together I think really works well. I think we get to know our residents, we get to know what they want and need much better, and it means that we get our voice, our tone of voice is much more appropriate. Hopefully, I think we've got that right. So sorry, I think we almost did that in time, but you never know when you're there in it. I see we've got some questions. I'll go through and answer those now if you'd like me to, Louise.
Have I stopped sharing my screen because I'm in a double screen situation where I can't see what I'm sharing?
Yeah, you've gone.
I've gone. Okay, great.
Unfortunately, we are struggling for time again in terms of taking questions. We're just not going to be in a position to do that today, but we will do what we did with the complaints one, is to pick up any on the chat and put them out to the presenters to come back to yourselves. There are some comments which I will just pick up on because they're coming up time and time again around Jackie. Could you share your triage documents and any supporting documents with Lisa, and we'll get those out to people as well if that's possible. So Jackie from 4 Housing, if you could do that, that would be lovely. And then the other comments are very positive just about the speakers. Lots of love out there for Darren and Anne in terms of putting their story forward and talking us through that, and also some really nice comments from everyone around what you've just said at West Kent, and also for John's session as well. So some really positives. What I'm going to try and do is just rejig things slightly so we're not keeping people you know, sort of waiting. So we are due a break at 12:30, which it is now. So I'm going to suggest that we take a break now for the 10 minutes as scheduled. And then I'm really hoping that Debbie Asker from Hull is able to join us after that 10-minute break and pick up the agenda from there. We haven't got Soha with us because they've got problems with their connectivity, and they were due to present later on this afternoon. So we will make up that time because we don't have that presentation now later on this afternoon. So yeah, I think it's an okay from Debbie at Hull to pick up after the break and do their session around mental health. So thank you ever so much for that, Debbie, appreciate it. And I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who's contributed so far this morning. You've been fabulous. It's been wonderful. Time for a bit of a break. Go grab yourselves a drink, stretch your legs, and we're back here to start off again round about 20 to 1. So I hope that's okay with everybody. And I'll see you back here at 20 to 1. Thank you. Okay, so I think we are about ready to make a start. Yeah, Lisa, anything I should know before we get going? There's nobody stuck in the waiting room or hiding anywhere. I think we've got everybody back.
Yeah, I think we're okay to go.
Good to go. Brilliant. Okay, so welcome back to this afternoon session. As I've said, I've had to rejig the agenda slightly, but the good news is we won't miss out on anything. So I'm not going to keep Debbie waiting any longer from Hull City Council. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to her for her patience. So I'm going to hand over to you, Debbie, to take us through the project around supporting good mental health.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Thanks, Louise. Yeah, good morning, everybody. I have got some slides which I'm going to try and share shortly. Not many, so I work for you with death by PowerPoint, but just to talk through some of the main things regarding the project that we've undertaken in Hull. So first of all, just to introduce myself, nice to meet you all today. I'm Debbie Akester, the Operations Manager for Hull City Council. So basically I manage the team on the housing management side of things in terms of Hull and the delivery in Hull. So I'll just try and share my slides with you all. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yeah, brilliant. Just take it from the beginning then. So basically, 2017, we was looking at how we were delivering our services in Hull, and obviously the impacts of welfare reform meant that we had to think a little bit differently in terms of us supporting tenants through tenancy sustainment and making sure that they're able to continue in the tenancy, the lifetime tenancies. We were the fourth deprived local authority in the UK, managing 23,000 approximate properties across the city. We entered into a number of initiatives around tenancy sustainment, and we had one in terms of supporting tenants in respect to mental health. Initially, it was a 12-month pilot, which we were able to extend due to the success really in terms of the partnership that we introduced. We was able to enter into a partnership arrangement, and we was able to access some funding. So we were able to take on a specialist mental health worker, working with the housing team specifically. Whilst they were still based with the Humber NHS Trust, and they was predominantly working with us to support our tenants within Hull, which worked really well. Because it was identified in terms of tenancy sustainment, it was a major factor for us in terms of some of those tenants out there struggling with mental health. And also we identified that in terms of our officers and the knowledge and experience that we had, whilst we did deliver training around mental health for our workers, we didn't have the expertise and the knowledge in terms of the health side of things in respect to mental health. And that was an area where we found that we had a gap in our knowledge and our resources. So enabling us to work more closely with the Humber NHS Trust gave us that experience and that knowledge and that ability to support our tenants more in terms of sustaining the tenancies. It meant we would get an immediate response because we had a direct referral into the officer who worked with us 100% of their time in terms of that support for our tenancies. So it was great joint working, and it also has some really positive benefits in terms of tenancy sustainment. So just to take you through some of our case studies that we've dealt with over the last 3 years. For example, the first tenant was referred into the service. They were suffering with acute anxiety, low mood, and they were hoarding. And basically, there wasn't engaging with us, and things were getting out of hand in terms of their tenancy. So by us enabling us to work with the mental health worker, was be able to build up that relationship with our tenant and allow her to enter that service, which she'd actually previously refused to engage with. And it gave her that opportunity to actually work with us, access some of those services which she hadn't been accessing previously. In order to improve a condition of a property, in order to give her the skills really to actually sustain her tenancy. And that's really had a really positive impact on her life and enabled her to move forward. And at the present time, she's actually considering moving house into a property that's more suitable for her needs, because she's currently in a larger property. So we're looking at downsizing her and supporting her with that. And so that's really going to have a massive impact on her life going forward in terms of her tenancy sustainment as well. Second example was a young person that was referred for ASB and causing nuisance in the neighbourhood. And again, that was having an impact on their tenancy in terms of the tenancy conditions. It was very early on identified through working with a mental health worker that this young person had a personality disorder. And because of their expertise and their background, they was able to support the young person and again, allow them to access the services that they needed, which they had previously not engaged with, build up that relationship with them along with the housing officer in order to support them in terms of taking that forward and being able to sustain the tenancy. So another success for us in that scenario. And then later on in the funding initially was for 12 months, but we were able to expand on that and actually introduce a second officer who worked with our homelessness team in Hull. And really that, supported people coming through that route in terms of housing options, where we were able to identify there was some additional support required in terms of mental health. And the third case study that I just want to talk you through is in respect to that process and that triage through the homelessness route. They'd been previously evicted by a private landlord for hoarding, and obviously they found themselves on the street, so they came to us for help. We was able to engage with the mental health worker. We set them up in a temporary tenancy through our, the properties we had available. And again, they started accessing services, they started building up that relationship and giving them that person the skills to be able to actually sustain their tenancy, working with the housing officers along the way as well, and making sure that holistic approach is actually taken. So, two-prong approach in terms of support and guidance in order for to enable that person to sustain their tenancy with us and then move on to a permanent tenancy with us. So three great examples there in terms of the work that we've done and being able to deliver in terms of us working with the mental health service. So in terms of our outcomes, at least 80% of our cases referred have been able to move on and continue and sustain their tenancies. It's given us a great opportunity to raise that awareness and skills for both housing and the mental health worker in terms of that joint working and understanding on both sides really in terms of some of the issues and some of the cases that we do come across, and to enable us to work more closely together to support tenants in order to sustain the tenancy. So again, that closer partnership working has been great in terms of being able to accommodate this partnership working over the last few years. Again, further opportunities for working with the homeless team, and we're hoping to progress that further. We've now got a dedicated mental health worker as well on hoarding, who's got specific skills in that area. So again, a big area for us to learn from and to actually support tenants moving forward. And in terms of the case referrals for this year, obviously it's been a very difficult year for everybody anyway with the pandemic, but we've been able to continue that support and those case referrals. And we've had 76 referrals so far this year from housing officers into the mental health support workers. And we've only had 10 where we've not engaged with the team and not been able to build that relationship with them, which again is a great success story for us. And we're hoping that we'll be able to continue with this approach moving forward. And definitely it's been a great success for us, and I think it's something that could benefit other areas in the country if they do want to take that approach as well. So yes, that's it in a nutshell. I didn't want to keep you too long, so welcome any questions.
Perfect, Debbie, and it does give us a couple of minutes maybe to take some questions as well, which is excellent, because I know as someone's put in the chat, mental health is huge at the moment. Lots of people struggling with the pandemic and stresses that brings. So we have got a question from Sally Truman, that is. When and who brings the mental health worker to work with the tenant? Maybe some concern around assumptions. So who makes that decision?
We do have a referral process through the housing officer that will go. They will discuss the case with their manager, their team manager, and then the referral will go across directly to the mental health and social worker. And then obviously they will look at the case and give us some feedback in terms of the suitability of whether it's appropriate for them to get involved at that stage. One benefit is that they obviously have access to all the systems that are used in the NHS, so they can look at the background of the customer and the tenant and see what services they've engaged with previously, and a little bit the history in terms of their lifestyle as well. And then it gives them the opportunity to identify whether it's suitable for us. So even if they don't feel that they can give us, open the case with them because it's not appropriate, then they can actually guide us in terms of where we need to go to access that support. But in general, we're finding that, a good 95% possibly, the cases they are able to take on and support us with, which has worked really well.
I hope that's answered your question, Sally. I think it has. And again, sort of really interesting to get to understand that a little bit more, Debbie. Thank you. So yeah, people saying, you know, fantastic outcomes, and yeah, you can't argue with them. Some really, really strong successes there, and people saying a good presentation as well. And I think, you know, obviously with the white paper, we do see mental health talked about in there. So clearly it's something that I think is going to sort of develop and grow in terms of the skills and maybe the training that's needed for staff across housing. And I think in your presentation you said it raised awareness and understanding. Is that something that you know is continuing, I guess? And is there any more plans around that, Debbie, in your organisation?
I'm sure it's something that we will, you know, obviously develop as we move forward. And yeah, you know, we obviously do offer training to our housing officers in terms of mental health awareness and that mental capacity and all that side of things. But I think, you know, to get that face-to-face contact and that, you know, on the ground contact with the mental health workers, I think that's really been the great benefit for us in terms of actually building our skills and our knowledge of how, you know, the mental health support workers actually work on the ground, really. And I think that's been a great benefit for us to work alongside them in terms of those, you know, that joint approach and to support our tenants. And it's given the housing officers those skills to actually be able to develop that further, you know, in the future. So yeah, it's worked really well.
Brilliant. That's lovely, Debbie. Thank you ever so much for that. So yeah, I don't think we've got any more questions. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, that would be great, Debbie. But thank you again. And we will share the presentation with people who've been on today's session. But really interesting stuff and good to hear about that that particular initiative and Paul. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks. We're going to move on now to look at mediation. Again, I think it's one of those areas that's really interesting. There's some organisations got some really good practice going off around how this works. So I'm delighted to welcome two organisations. We've got Derwent Living and Two Rivers Housing Association with us, who are going to explain a little bit about how they do mediation. So first up, hopefully I've got Mitch with us from Derwent.
Yep, I'm here.
Brilliant, Mitch. Over to you when you're ready.
Yep, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me along. Just to introduce myself, I'm Mitch Olsebrook. I'm the Customer Engagement Manager for Derwent Living. We're a housing association based in Derby. We're part of the wider Places for People group, but we've got about 20,000 properties sort of spread quite widely over the Midlands region. We go from Sheffield to Milton Keynes, Lincoln one way, Coventry the others. We've got quite a big geographical spread. So I've been asked to come along and talk about our mediation project. So what I just wanted to do to start with was to give the sort of the background to the project and how it came about. And also, I'm sure people do know what mediation is, but for those of you who might be a little bit unsure, just in its very sort of simplest form and in the sort of housing arena, what it is for us is where we've got neighbours who've got disputes. Most common ones are things like noise, nuisance, minor falling out with neighbours, issues around parking, that sort of thing. It tends to be your low-level antisocial behaviour. Well, mediation is where we try and get an independent third party to try and come in and help resolve that dispute by acting between the parties. It's sometimes more than two parties. We've had cases where we've had 3 or 4 different properties all involved on a group mediation. So in its simplest form, that's what it is. It's trying to broker a deal between the parties who are in dispute about whatever the issue might be. So, as I say, going back to give a little bit of a background to our project. So we've been running this project since late 2013. Prior to the current project we're running, we had outsourced mediation. So what we used to do was buy in a mediation service from an external provider. And we've done that for a number of years, but we'd got to the stage where really we decided it wasn't working for us as an organisation or for our customers. It was very expensive. We had a limited number of cases we could refer each year. And also the feedback we were getting on those cases wasn't what we'd expect it or want it to be. So the decision was made that we'd end the relationship we had with the external mediation provider. So we needed to look at a new way of doing that, which was where I came in. Part of my role is to try and engage our customers and involve them in improving the services we provide. So we looked at options for involving our customers in the mediation service. Okay, so what we decided we would do, we decided we'd bring the mediation service in-house and we'd look to recruit a pool of volunteers. Now, one of the things I like about this project since we've started it is very much a partnership project between the staff and the customer volunteers as well. So we wanted to get a pool of a dozen trained mediators to do cases on our behalf. So we looked to get half of that team being customer volunteers and half staff volunteers. And these would be staff members that wouldn't have any sort of enforcement within their current job role. So we tended to get back office staff who didn't really deal with customers on a day-to-day basis. It might be someone from our accounts team or someone out of IT, but we wanted to get a really good mix of people on the project. One of the key things we wanted to do as well was make sure that the training we were providing was going to be of the highest quality to make the project work and give it the best chance of success. So very early on, we engaged with UK Mediation. And we looked at the training options that were available, and we put the volunteers, both staff and customers, as one joint team. So we wanted to foster that sense that it was one team and it was a joint effort. We put them through a professional qualification in mediation. It's quite expensive training. It was a big investment in all those people. It was very tough training as well. And to get on the training, we held a competitive recruitment process as well, and UK Mediation helped us with that. So we held interviews for both the staff and the customers who wanted to get involved in the project as well, because we wanted to make sure we were getting the right people for those roles, whether they were staff or customers, that are bringing the right sort of skills and qualities to the table that would make them ideal candidates for delivering mediation for us. So we went through the training process. Luckily, we had 12 people that qualified and got a professional qualification in mediation. So that was great. So we had our team and we wanted to take that project forward. Okay, so how it works is, since we started the project, and you're probably all familiar with sort of situations like this where you live in your neighbourhoods and communities, it tends to be low-level antisocial behaviour that goes forward for mediation. So it's things like your noise nuisance, clash of lifestyles, this sort of thing. So what would happen as an idea, a housing officer may be aware of one of these situations in place, whereas previously they were a bit reticent to put cases through for mediation. We had an external provider because it was very expensive. And by the time sometimes that they did put a case through, it kind of passed that point of no return, and things had escalated from something quite minor, got more and more serious. And even when they put the cases through, it had kind of gone past the point where it could have any effect. So we like to get in really early, try and nip things in the bud as best we can. So the housing officer would talk to the parties involved and say, would you like to go into mediation? We think it might help resolve your situation. And then we'll look to allocate a pair of mediators. So our mediators always work in partnership. When we first started the project, we specifically teamed up staff mediators and customer mediators together because we thought that complemented itself very well. And we found that in the early stages that did work. The staff would bring perhaps a little bit more back office knowledge around how the organisation operates. And the customers who went into the mediation process, they found it really reassuring that there was someone who perhaps could see things from their point of view as well. So our customer mediators. And that worked really well in the early stages, but we've been doing it for so long now that we don't really have to have a staff and a customer mediator. Probably our three most experienced mediators now are all customer ones. So quite often now they will go off and do cases in tandem as well, because the project sort of expanded its remit in that way. So they'll go out, they'll do an initial meeting with one of the parties, and then they'll do a separate meeting with the other party. Then with the idea of bringing them to a table together, sit down, talk about the differences, whatever the nature of the dispute is, and come up with an agreement that both parties feels like they can live with, basically. And sometimes it can be very simple things about if it's a noise nuisance, you have things like turning the telly down at certain times or whatever it might be. So they do tend to be like I say, the lower level type things. So that project's worked really well for us over the last few years. Now, I know we're limited for time, we'll go into a lot more detail, but some of the key benefits that it's brought to us is, compared to what we had previously, the costs are a lot lower of the project now. So we're saving money as an organisation. We can do better things with that. We can invest in properties a bit more, whatever that might be, and put that money to better use. We've got far more control over the process because it's in-house. So the communication between our tenancy services team and the mediators is excellent. They've got those relationships that have built up over a number of time. And particularly with the customer mediators, the housing officers know who they are. There's a really good relationship there. And from that point of view, it brings a lot of extra quality to the project. And one of the key things for me and from my role is the investment that we put into our customers and our staff members as well. It wasn't cheap training, it was very high quality training, but I think it showed how much we wanted to make that service work for our customers, that we invested that amount of time and resource into those customer volunteers who wanted to become mediators. So as I say, we're running the project for quite a few years now. So just as a broad overview of some of the sort of key benefits to us as an organisation and our customers. Previously, when we outsourced it, we had a success rate of about 1 in 9, 1 in 10 on mediation cases. We now have a success rate of about 1 in 3. And that is normally, once the mediators get their foot in the door, we normally have a good result. Quite often what will happen when the mediators first contact parties, you may have one party that steps back and says, actually, I've thought about it and I don't want to do it anymore. But once they get the foot in the door, we normally get a decent result from that. We average about 3 cases a month. So, you know, we're doing upwards of anywhere between 30 and 40 cases a year now, where previously we used to be limited to 10 because that's all we'd paid for. So it might be that things that were relevant for mediation might have been happening, but we just didn't have the cases left to refer that. So we're a lot more flexible and we can actually deal with a lot more cases. Again, because we bought it in-house and it's our own mediation team, it's helped reduce costs by about 80% of the average case. It's come down from about £1,000 a case to about 200. So obviously there's a great cost saving there. And from everything we do as an organisation as well, certainly from my point of view, for me to be able to justify doing projects like this, if I can show that there's a cost saving to the organisation, then that's always a benefit as well. And one of the key things we found is because we refer cases at a far earlier stage, it then frees up time for our housing officers and our tenancy services team to perhaps go off and deal with those cases that are at a higher level and perhaps more serious. So it frees up staff resource for those enforcement roles as well within the organisation. Now, I've spoke about this project a few times at different events, and normally I've got one of the customer mediators with me, but obviously, as I say, we were limited for time. But what I wanted to do is I've gone away and asked Russ, who's one of our customer mediators, what he got out of the project, and he's been one of our most long-standing ones. And from a personal point of view, he said that the project's given him a lot of self-confidence. He was previously, well, he was unemployed, he'd recently been made redundant, he'd got ill health. And he said the investment that we put into him to get him this professional qualification really helped boost his self-esteem. He loves the fact that he's helping people, helping neighbours to resolve these issues as well. It gives him a sense of achievement. Also, it says it's given him a really good insight to how some of the elements of a housing association operates, particularly in terms of tenancy enforcement as well. And it's expanded his experiences. And again, just echoing what I said earlier, one of the things he really likes about it is it's very much a partnership project between the staff involved on it and the customers. They see themselves as one mediation team. It's not, there's your staff mediators, there's your customers. It's just, we are the mediation team. And he says that that's one of the main positives out of the project as well. So as I say, hopefully I've not gone over my time too much there. It's a quick whistle stop tour. So I'm happy if we've got time to take any questions, but I'll hand back over to Louise now.
Thank you for that, Mitch. Really good stuff and a brilliant project. We have got maybe time for a couple very, very quick questions. GDPR, how do you get around that in terms of them knowing? And also one around, do you get involved with private tenants as well?
Okay, on the private tenant, yeah, we have had mediation where we've had a tenant living next door to a private owner. And from our point of view, in terms of mediation, it doesn't bother us. It's within our communities, even though one isn't our customer. If we can help resolve that issue, we will. So they're not as common, but we do have some cases where we've taken on, it might be a dispute between our tenant and a private owner. So yeah, we would cover that. We try not to turn anything down for mediation. If we feel it can help, then we'll go into it. In terms of GDPR, confidentiality, that side of thing, before any contacts made via our mediation team, all the parties going into mediation will sign an approval form to say, we're happy for you to share our details with the mediators. We want to go into that process. So they will sign a disclaimer to say, we're happy for you to pass over our contact details so that the mediators can get in contact and get the ball rolling with that.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Mitch. That's great. Lovely. We're going to move on then to our next presenters who are going to talk about a similar project, but there are some differences. And it's Julia from Two Rivers Housing Association. I know Julia's with us because she's messaged us. It may not say a name on the screen, but that doesn't matter, Julia. Can you hear me? Is that all right?
I can, yeah. I think I'm called Galaxy Tab.
Don't worry, that's a great name.
I've got some slides, so I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we've got your screen.
That's it. Yeah. So trying to get into my presentation. Oh, where's it gone?
Don't worry.
There we go.
Always that moment,
hang on. I should get the emails and I can get to my presentation. There we go.
We've got nothing confidential on there. We'll not tell anybody. You're all right.
There we go. Oh, come on.
Just while Julie's getting the slides up, Mitch, just want to say there's a lot of people very impressed with your project. I'm sure you've seen from the chat. So you may have some people may be contacting you, and same for all our presenters. I hope you're happy if people do get in touch, because I know there's probably lots more they'd like to ask. But yeah, a lot of praise on there, Mitch, for the project you've got running at Derwent. Julie, how are we getting on? Yep. Julia, can you hear me all right?
I've got those slides if you want me to try sharing the screen. Would that help?
Yeah, Lisa, do you want to put the slides up for Julia? I presume she's still there. Or we lost her altogether now? No, I don't think she's with us now, is she? Okay, not to worry. What we'll do is we'll move on to the next presentation, and maybe we can bring her back, and Lisa, you could get the slides up for her. I can't see her on the participants list now. I'm not sure what's happened to her unless I've missed her.
No, I can't either. I think
maybe she'll join us again. Okay, well, I'm really hoping that we've got Louise with us from Salvation Army Housing Association. Louise, can you hear me all right?
Here, yes. Can you hear me?
We can indeed, Louise. I just want to say, Louise is going to talk a bit about professionalisation of staff. Again, going back to the white paper, there's lots of mentions about how that's a real ambition of the white paper, to make sure that staff are able to treat tenants with respect, and the whole customer service aspect of it is where it should be. And I know Louise has been doing some good work around that at Salvation Army. So over to yourself, Louise.
Oh, well, thank you for that introduction, Louise.
Sorry, the bar quite high there, but doesn't matter. I mean, you've done this before in terms of your presentation. I know there's some good stuff around engagement as well, making sure that other organisations, other parts of the business understand engagement. So yeah, over to you.
No, thank you. So hello, everybody, and thank you for listening. So as Louise mentioned then, I'm going to talk a little bit about employee induction at SAHA and how I managed to wangle my way into helping to facilitate the whole day and really make engagement part of that day in the session. So a little bit of background about us and me. SAHA are a smaller housing association. We're not quite as large as some of you who've come in today, but I bet we give you a bit of a run for money for geography. So about 3,800 properties, predominantly supported housing, but we're in 81 local authorities across the country. So we range from the beautiful Cornwall all the way up into the northeast in Darlington. And as you can imagine, that presents its own issues as it is. But our customer insight team, I'm a part of that. I'm the customer insight manager here at SAHA, and I have two other staff members with me, one based in the south, one based in the north. So again, that helps with our geography and being able to do our interactions. But we do what we call the corporate involvement here at SAHA. So that's our scrutiny panel, our SAHA rewards group, and kind of everything between that. I'm sure everybody else who's involved in involvement here will know that, you know, we're quite lucky in what we do. We're able to access every department in the role that we work with, which is quite unique in our organisations. Not everybody has that opportunity to work, not in the silo that we have. So the project that we worked on with the staff engagement and induction programme, about 2 years ago now, we were looking at the induction as a whole at SAHA. Did it work? Did it not work? Were people engaging with it? Was it just, you know, death by PowerPoint, death by EMT coming in and talking at you about what they do and how great everything else was? And we wanted to really get staff engaged with that, get people working on projects together, and to kind of think outside the box a little bit more. So for us, it was about everybody understanding what the impact of involvement is. And I know everybody's talked about that in the presentations today. It's so important that the voice of our residents are heard. They can see the changes that come with, you know, the service delivery, questions that they're asking, you know, scrutiny issues that they're bringing up. People want to know that they're being listened to and valued. And what we wanted to do with the employees was make them understand that everything is involvement. So it doesn't have to be, you know, a recognised involvement activity. Every contact that they have with a resident is involvement. So what we did, we started off in the sessions quite informally. We wanted to talk about what involvement meant. It is a really broad range topic. What it means to me might not necessarily be exactly the same thing it means to you, but what we want to get from that is the same goal. And we wanted an organic conversation that allowed everybody to talk about positives, but also the pitfalls. Not everything works. Not everybody comes to a meeting. Not everybody can get involved in the same way as everybody else. And we wanted to look at the different ways that that could work. So I'm just going to run through, if that's okay with everybody, a quick kind of session of what it would look like. So back in pre-COVID days when we could actually go face to face and talk to people and sit in the same room, we'd hold a whole day in one of our offices, so whether it's our head office or one of our regional offices, and everybody who was new since our last induction would be invited to that day. And it doesn't matter what department that would do. Now we're doing it via Teams and very much like this. But what we wanted to impress, especially for my team and being involved in the whole day and facilitating the sessions, was about approachability. If they can approach me, we can help them facilitate projects in their services and their schemes, and that will get residents involved. And it also gave us a chance to have plenty of opportunity for discussions about anything that they wanted to come if they wanted advice. So in our segment of the induction, we talk about the team generally, like I've just done with you. We also cover the role. And I said, like again before, we're quite lucky. We get to see the bigger picture. And from that beautiful example before with the comms and the, you know, the resident stories, we're able to show that to people. I think other departments sometimes get lost in the work that they're doing and don't get to see, you know, being able to show the really good examples of getting somebody involved in the confidence building or employment opportunities that people get to do. And we get to talk about that. We also talk about, you know, the kind of work that the scrutiny panel does, and then we go into, you know, the tenant involvement empowerment standard and the importance of all that being incorporated into your everyday work. People are already doing this in you know, in their everyday job, and sometimes it's pointing out the obvious to them that when you've had that chat, you know, with a resident, you've had a brew and they've told you something, or they've been able to say to you, I want to do this, I want to progress on that. That is involvement, but it's making sure that them interactions with our residents and the insights that we're learning from that we're doing something with it and we're adjusting our services. And again, picking up that one of the most important changes is for the residents themselves, you know, whether it's personal change of just being able to come to a session and then do something like this. You know, we've had two wonderful resident speakers today who might not have had the confidence a couple of years ago to do this, or whether it's a service change at a massive level of a customer feedback and complaint policy. It all matters. In that session, then we kind of break off and we get them to talk to each other about what they're doing, some best practice that they've got themselves. Again, I mentioned we're in 81 local authorities. In some of them areas, we've only got 4 or 5 properties. In some of others, we've got, you know, over 100. And the way that the involvement takes place there can be very different. So what we want people to do then is talk about what works for them. Can they work together on a project, you know, make it wider, a far-reaching project than just their scheme? We then like to show the nice stuff, you know, the videos from our residents, something from our chair at T4R, We'll talk about scrutiny panels. We'll look at our What's New This Month, Get Involved update. We'll talk about, again, the changes, and I'm sorry that I keep reiterating that, but we want to show the importance of getting people involved and why it matters. So for example, at our last induction, we talked about our commitment to consultation that's been taking place. We've been doing that over Teams, via text, online services, phones, but that is to show our employees that we only ask 2 questions to our residents. You know, what services do you want from us and how do you want us to deliver them? 2 very simple, clear answers we got from them as well. And we'll push that forward at the induction. So then it's spread across all the teams. They'll go back, they'll talk about what we've talked about and how they can then deliver on that. And the next one, we're going to be talking about complaints. And I know everybody's talked about it today. And I think we're not on our own by saying that. Everybody's been looking at the complaints process at the moment and a change in that. That's what we'll deliver at our next session, how that's going to work, the benefits for our residents. What I like about the induction is it gives us a real good chance to shout about everything that's wonderful that's happening. You know, I mentioned our staff are brilliant, and especially during COVID time at the moment, our services are open. Our supported services are open to residents who can't go anywhere else as well. And we want to show the really good work that they're doing there and what's been produced by them. But it gives it the chance to be a little bit more organic as well in that session. So from the inductions, we've had scrutiny panel podcasts that have come out. We only planned for 6. We're currently on 9. That's kind of how it happens. They like to talk like I do. But what we've been doing with that is then inviting staff members onto that. So they'll come and talk about their department. They'll come and talk about the projects that they're working on. They'll ask for resident involvement in there. So it just makes it a little bit more transparent about what they're doing. We're also doing coffee mornings as well now with our staff members, just having a brew. You know, we all know that a brew goes a long way with a biscuit as well, with people just to figure out what's going on. But we get 4 or 5 people together and they'll talk about projects again that's going on. This has led to our resident reps that we're looking at, our national resident reps. The pilot's starting with that now because they've been able to work together and look at how they're going to use that information, not just corporately, but also locally. So I'll just quickly finish off with my tips as well, because, you know, it's not always easy to get on the corporate induction and they appreciate that. So what I managed to do was, you know, I shout and I shoe all myself in. If you can't do that, get in on your team meetings. You know, we have a weekly catch up with our housing teams now to push what's happening with them, push the involvement, and then again, that kind of grows into projects. But if you can like do this like you can with this session, I would do something a little bit more interactive. We've been using a lot of Menti and our virtual inductions at the moment. So just start that question, you know, what does involvement mean to you? Get people talking about it. What are your barriers? What can your team do to help, you know, the other departments? That's been a really good help for us to be able to kind of springboard into other projects. And again, it sounds really cheesy, but have fun with it. Nobody wants a rigid meeting. It needs to be flexible. It needs to be a little bit of fun. But if anybody's got any questions, please drop them in the chat and I'm happy to answer them later.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that, Louise. Again, I think this idea that all staff receive, you know, as part of their induction engagement is essential, particularly with the white paper, even more so. And I love the fact that they're told that they've got a role to play, you know, that conversation, that informal engagement, you know, bring that back, it's insight, it's information. So some really good stuff there, Louise. So thank you for sharing that with us. And also a plug for Tpas as well. If you're not sure how or want somebody to deliver your engagement induction training, we have a fabulous new course available. So do check out our brochure. That was the advert for the session. So on all seriousness now, I guess just to say, really enjoyed today because it's always good to get people talking about the white paper, but I think what we've done with the presentations today has really brought out some of the things that are already happening. People haven't waited for this. They've gone away, they've set up some very, very good projects. And for me, it's been a real inspiration to listen to the good stuff. So I hope people have found it useful. From the chat, everybody's saying they have, and I'm sure there'll be lots of conversations to be had after this session with people getting in touch and networking. So just to say again, big thank you. I'm sorry that we didn't quite get Julia, and we also didn't quite get the lady from Soha, Jackie, as well. But we will be doing more sessions if this is something that you want to see, and maybe we can give more time to more specific themes as well. But overall, big thank you to everybody for joining us today, and thanks to our presenters. I think that's it. Lisa, is there anything we need to add? Slides are going out. We've done the admin stuff, and hopefully we'll be running another sort of white paper session at the regional event, where we'll just do some conversations and some chats. But if anybody's got any ideas for more things they want to see us do let us know. We'll respond to that, absolutely. So thanks, folks. I think that's it. Go get yourself some lunch, chill out a little bit before afternoon starts again. Lovely to see you all. Look after yourselves, take care, and hopefully see you again very soon at one of our Tpas online events. Cheers, folks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Get off here.
Bye.